All right. Well, thank you everybody for your patience. We want to give a few minutes here to get things moving. First off, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. This is our third tribal consultation for the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, NOFO number 2. This is the third, did I say second? This is a third tribal consultation that we've had on this topic. We had one on Monday, we had one on Wednesday, and we've had one today. So this will be our third time here addressing a set of 4 questions that we have sent out in a Dear Tribal Leader letter on August 18th. Before we get too far, I also want to just say, my name is Adam Geisler, and I'm the Division Chief for the Tribal Connectivity and Nation-to-Nation Coordination Division and an enrolled member of the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians. And today I'm actually coming to you live from Honolulu, Hawaii, which is the ancestral homelands of the Native Hawaiian people. And I want to acknowledge that that we're coming to you today to discuss NOFO number 2 from the ancestral homelands of the people here from the natural springs in Honolulu. I was told when I was asking about the right way to do the land acknowledgement, how folks in Hawaii identified themselves, and it was often by where natural water was occurring. So there's actually a spring here that I was asked to speak to and acknowledge the people that were around this spring. So with that, we have quite a bit in front of us today. If we could move on to the next slide, please. We're going to be doing a few things. One, we're going to be covering some welcoming and opening remarks. We're really honored today to have both Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson provide some opening remarks, as well as the invocation by President John Nez of the Navajo Nation. We're then going to do a quick overview of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, and then from there, we're going to jump into the 4 questions that were a part of what we are asking in relationship to NOFO number 2 within the Dear Tribal Leader letter dated August 18th. I also should highlight that today will be the last day that we're accepting comments on these 4 questions. So again, as you're going through the consultation and you want to submit those in writing, I just want to highlight that those are going to be due today at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So with that, we'll go ahead and move forward with the next slide. All right, so it is really my distinct honor to recognize Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson. Mr. Davidson is not only the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, but also he has 2 hats, pretty common in Indian country, no different in government at times, where he is also the administrator for NTIA. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Davidson. This individual has really stood behind addressing the digital divide of the nation and quarterbacking not only the TBCP program, but all the dollars that are here at NTIA. And I'll tell you firsthand that he has spent the time to go see the issues. He spent nearly a week traveling Alaska and putting his feet on the ground and talking to the community and understanding what the issues really are and the challenges that we all face when we talk about connecting every household in America. And so it is, again, my distinct honor to recognize Mr. Alan Davidson to provide his opening remarks today. Over to you, Assistant Secretary Davidson.
Hello, I'm Alan Davidson, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information and the Administrator of NTIA. I'd like to take a moment to both welcome and thank all the tribal leaders who are joining us today, as well as the other stakeholders who are with us for this consultation. As those of you who have participated in these consultations before well know, these meetings are just vital for us in shaping our policies for connecting the unconnected on tribal lands. Last January, for example, you helped us determine the timing and the funding amounts for a second round of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, which we'll be discussing today. So we really believe in these consultations, and we appreciate the time that you all are putting in to be with us today. We all know the importance of universal, affordable, high-speed internet service. It's just essential infrastructure today for connecting rural communities, educating our students, keeping us healthy. I was able to hear firsthand about some of these needs, most recently in a trip I took to visit with tribal communities in Alaska just a few weeks ago. And it was incredibly powerful to see firsthand what it really means to people living in these communities to be able to get a high-speed, reliable, affordable connection, and also to see the challenges. We visited with Native community members in places like Napakiak and Napaskiak, the village of Tanana on the Yukon River. We were in the town of Port Lions on Kodiak Island. In each of these communities, we were able to speak with community members who, live in very different places, but share very similar stories about their need and the opportunity before us. We heard about the importance of access in remote places. We heard about the importance of affordability. It was incredible to see the actual bills that people brought us, showed us on their phones, $700 or $800 a month that some folks were paying there for actually very low bandwidth connections. And it was incredible to hear about the kind of opportunity and hope that we can bring if we can actually provide that kind of affordable and reliable high-speed access. Now, I was very grateful for the stories that these folks shared with us, and I think our whole team came away invigorated and feeling a sense of purpose about the importance of this next round of funding. To help meet all these needs, to date, NTIA has made a total of 69 different awards, totaling over $700 million through our tribal broadband connectivity program. And there's a lot more to come. Thanks to President Biden's leadership and leadership in Congress, we've passed a historic bipartisan law that's designed to connect 100% of the people in America. That includes all the people in our tribal communities. The the bipartisan infrastructure law included an additional $2 billion for our tribal connectivity program, which triples the amount of funding that we had before. We had previously allocated $1 billion of funding to the existing applications that we got in our first round. We've added another $1 billion based on the consultations that we had with all of you to that first round. And we've reserved the remaining funds, approximately $1 billion, for a second notice of funding opportunity, which we really want to hear from you about today. We've targeted this new notice to open later next month, and eligible tribal entities will have about 6 months to fill out the new applications. We'll be incorporating your feedback from today's session into this new notice. So please speak up in today's meeting, submit written comments to us, reach out to the appropriate staff of NTIA. We want to hear your feedback and your ideas. There's a saying in the civic tech community that I come from that we should aspire to build with, not for. Right? Build with communities, not for communities. And that is why these consultations are so important. We know that we have a unique opportunity to work with you to help close the digital divide across Indian country. How we proceed is important, which is why the Commerce Department, NTIA, why we're hosting this tribal consultation today. So we are excited, I am excited to continue working with you and our other tribal partners to meet this historic moment and provide internet service for everyone. Thank you, and we appreciate your participation.
All right. Well, thank you, Assistant Secretary Davidson, for those opening remarks. And I just really want to echo the sentiment around building communities with you, not for you. The TBCP program has really been founded in such a thing. So thank you again, Assistant Secretary. All right, well, with that, we are really honored to have a tribal leader that I have a lot of respect for. I've been following him this week on social media. He seems like a very busy man between the Department of Labor and the bipartisan, or excuse me, and the recent legislation signing, the Treasury of the United States swearing in. You've been a busy man, Mr. President Nez. And I really just want to say thank you for finding some time to come in and provide us with the opening invocation and blessing for today's tribal consultation on the second round or the second NOFO for the TBCP program. So with that, it is my distinct honor to recognize President Jonathan Nez of the Navajo Nation. Over to you, President.
Thank you, and good morning to those that are in the western part of the United States, and good afternoon for those on the eastern part of the United States. As was mentioned, Jonathan Nez, President of the Navajo Nation. Thank you, Adam, and the team there at NTIA, one of our own, Chris Vicente, as well. And, you know, there's an opportunity here to give our tribal input through the second NFOA for the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. So as always, let's lift this discussion to the Creator and ask for strength, wisdom, protection, and good health. So if I may, I'd like to give the invocation in our own Navajo language. So Yot Edi Chikwa Asasi Tlingido Nat Anishi Kagish Kliji Sich Kliji Dandangi Asataz Nidich Ado NTIA agent Dad Nishigido Nihinat Ein and Lingin Lee Nihi Washington the Don the Has Tranigin Hinat Ani Johnny Nakijia Tragijia Da Eya Large Dasatagi President Joe Biden Do Kenneth Dasatagi Vice President Kamala Harris Do Washington the Nat Ani Handan Lingi Bisatis Dasi Kli Do Nha Yadaski od Ekon Kagish Kijini Klinigi Ba He Nitsado Kodoshin Ras Chane Dilis Nantin Hatado Eben Nachi Ekon Nas Del Ido Lesti Being Del Kidigido cell phones that Eggy John does Nesto left the Nebiki of Kaudo Lego Kagish Kiji Hadasto Bahadasto Baba can't need to know. We just give this time over to you, the Creator. We ask for strength. We ask for wisdom throughout these meetings. May the tribes get the information clearly to our federal friends. You know, many of us grew up with our own native tongue, and at times, getting that in English is a challenge. But I know that with your help, we will communicate effectively and clearly throughout this tribal consultation, and to provide fast internet, better broadband, and telecommunication throughout this country. And we also pray, Lord, that we change some of the regulations and policies so that things can get done a lot quicker. And so we give this time to you, and we appreciate Adam and NTIA and all our tribal leaders that are on call today. And so we lift this up to you, Creator, and we pray this all in your name. Amen. Thank you, Adam.
Welcome. Thank you, President Nez. I appreciate it. And safe travels to you and your team as you make your way home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what a great way to get us started in a good way today. It's always great to have a leader acknowledge, I think, the work that we're all trying to do and bring us together to really address some of the challenges that we have in front of us, but also acknowledge some of the challenges we've overcome. And that's really what today is about, in how do we continue to improve the things that we have that we've been working towards in addressing the digital divide and providing high-speed internet service that is affordable to our Indigenous communities. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the next slide. Carol, would you mind going over how to bring people on and off of mute, as well as the raise hand function?
Yeah, sure, Adam. I'm happy to do that. So the slide you see here just has the quick important information. The way we facilitate your comments is if you have something to say about a question that is currently being posed, and we will put those up after this slide. You just use the raise hand function on the bottom toolbar in Zoom. Probably used that before. We have a little diagram here that shows you where that is. If you're on a mobile device or a phone and you don't have this functionality, if you've dialed in, you can press *9 on your device, and that will actually raise your hand. I can see that on my side, and we will know that you would like to speak. So it's as simple as that. If you also want to, provide feedback, you can use the question Q&A box. It's right next to the chat box. We ask that you put that in the Q&A because we can capture that after the event most effectively in that manner. So hopefully that's helpful, and we'd love to hear from you. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Carol. And just as a reminder for today, this tribal consultation is really meant to be a government-to-government consultation. And again, in recognition of the tribal leaders that we have on the line, I am going to ask that we hear from tribal leaders specifically. And if your respective tribal government or tribal leader has given you the authority to speak on behalf of the tribe, I realize sometimes as a former tribal leader, there were moments when I would come into situations and I would like my subject matter expert to speak on my behalf or my tribe's behalf. That is absolutely okay, but I do want to get on the record that if you are going to be doing that, that you have the consent of the tribe to do that. So again, this is intended to be a government-to-government consultation respecting the sovereignty of tribal nations and the unique relationship that the United States government holds with respective federally recognized tribes. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and we'll jump on to the next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, we were going to do a brief overview, and you heard Assistant Secretary Davidson mention that we've gotten over $700 million out so far. We've actually made 69 awards totaling over $720 million. And there's more awards to come. I think a lot of you are wondering, Adam, is that the end? And no, it's actually not even close to the end. We have several hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects in the pipe right now, going through the clearance process that I'm sure many of you have been engaged on with our team in the cures. And as I mentioned, you probably heard me say hundreds of millions of dollars. That's because one of the decisions that we have reached here at NTIA after the tribal consultation earlier this year was to add an additional $1 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law to the existing TBCP round 1 NOFO. So for those of you that are saying, hey, what's taking so long? We've added more money and we're making more awards. So we are going to not award just $1 billion in round 1, but we've added another $1 billion to it from the bipartisan infrastructure law to make it a total of nearly $2 billion that we are going to be funding. So we heard you loud and clear to lessen the burden. With that being said, we also heard a number of you share that there were concerns about folks that either didn't have an opportunity to apply or folks that still maybe were receiving the $500,000 equitable distribution and wanted to be able to come back to the table. So after hearing all of that, we also reached the conclusion that we would use the balance of those funds to open up a second round, which is pretty consistent with the feedback that we've heard during the consultative process. So to recap, we've made 69 awards with many more to come, totaling over $720 million. We also added an additional $1 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The program received initially $2 billion from the bill. We took $1 billion of that and added it to the existing NOFO. So we're going to be making $2 billion worth of awards, roughly. And then the remaining funds that are left over through this round one are going to be rolled over, and that's going to be approximately $1 billion that we're going to be talking about how we should be approaching for round two of the NOFO. So with that, we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the four topics that we're really looking to dig into today. And I do ask that I want to recognize one that there are probably a number of items that folks would want to share in relationship to the program, but I am going to ask that we keep the discussion, if we can, around these four primary areas, largely in part because as we've talked to the team and frankly fielded your feedback throughout NOFO number one, we've not even come to the conclusion. I think we've all collectively recognized that we do need to talk about these four items in particular. So with that being said, we have four questions on the table that we're going to discuss today, and we're going to go through these one at a time and open up feedback around each question so that we can capture the specific feedback for each one of these questions. But here's the overall picture. Should NTIA consider prioritization of new projects in the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program? If so, how should these be prioritized? The second question we're going to discuss is what type of guidance or documentation can or should be included in or in addition to the NOFO that would assist applicants in completing their application. Three is a technical assistance question. How can technical assistance from NTIA be improved to ensure timely and complete submissions? Number four is a big one. I've heard a lot of you discuss supply chain concerns. And so number four is going to be in relationship to should tribal broadband connectivity program applicants be subject to the Build America, Buy America Act domestic sourcing requirements for materials and equipment. Additionally, how does the Build America, Buy America Act impact applicants' ability to complete their proposed projects? So four very detailed questions that we are going to go through one at a time. And so with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, and we'll start talking about question number one. All right, so again, we're engaging here in government-to-government consultation. I'm really hoping to get your feedback. Again, please use the raised hand feature or the, what is it, Carol, *9 in the, if you're dialing in via phone, so we can put you in the queue. And we will announce your name if you're up. We will also say if you're in the batter's box, Mr. Matthew Rogotsky here will be helping us navigate who's in the queue or in the batter's box as we work our way through these questions. So question number one, should NTIA consider prioritization of new projects in the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program? If so, how should these be prioritized? And so I'm going to tease this a little bit. We have $1 billion left, and it's a very different landscape today than where we were previously. And so, you know, one of the questions that's, I guess, a subpart to this, again, I'm just trying to get folks thinking, is should we be looking at prioritizing this next round based upon speed thresholds, setting a requirement around giving preference to those projects that have higher speed? Should we be looking at giving preference to those projects that are shovel ready? Should we be giving preference to applicants that are receiving the equitable distribution, the 500,000 in round one, or that applied in round one? Should they get preference or priority over those that maybe had not applied previously? If there's any other dynamics, are there, we did hear some folks, I'll just be honest with you here, in consultation one, that shared that they don't believe that folks that receive funding in this first round of TBCP should be eligible for the second round if they received a large award. So with that, Matt, I imagine the queue is going to start to fill up, and I will go ahead and pause, and we'll go ahead and engage in any tribal leader feedback.
Yep, we had Jennifer Webster with an early hand raise, followed by Joe Garcia, and we'll add other folks as they pop in.
Wonderful. All right, Jennifer, we're going to be bringing you off of mute. And if you could, actually, there's usually a 15-second thing there, so I'll give it a second, or 10. Jennifer, if you don't mind, we're going to bring you off of mute, and if you could just say the name of your tribe and your title, so we can capture that. This is being recorded, and we will post not only the recording but the transcript online into the future. So with that, Jennifer, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay,
Welcome.
can you see me?
Let's see. Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm prepared to go through all 4 questions, but would you prefer me to just go through item 1?
Item 1, please.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, President Nez. My name is Jennifer Webster from Oneida Nation, council member. So for question 1, in regards to scoring, the previous application and a future application, the Oneida Nation applied for the TBCP funding a year ago in September 2021. We were very disappointed not to have been awarded the funding. The application took a lot of time, money, and effort to submit, and we believe that we had a well thought out and detailed application. The nation would like to know the specifics of how our application was scored so that we can ensure that our application for round 2 funding is fully responsive. Also, in regards to streamlined application process, given the immense amount of effort in our initial application, we do not relish repeating the same process. We would like to see the application process streamlined for those who applied previously for TBCP funding. In regards to priority consideration, previous application, we believe that the nation's application made it through the programmatic review, but was not funded due to oversubscription. If this is the case, we believe our second application should be given priority consideration. In regards to extra points, moving broadband forward, we have moved ahead on a number of initiatives that have detailed in our grant application, such as fiber audit and working on a tower build out. We would like to see extra points awarded for round 2 applicants. We have shown initiatives to address broadband needs and move forward in their broadband plans. So let us be clear, however, that the need for broadband is still great, and due to lack of funding, our unserved tribal members continue to suffer. And then in regards to unique situations, the urban and rural areas, our reservation is relatively unique in that it encompasses the city of Green Bay, which generally has good broadband, but as soon as you leave the city limits, broadband access is very poor, especially in the south and northwest corners of the reservation, which are very rural in nature. We ask that the upcoming NOFO provide for such unique situations as ours and does not penalize us for having a mix or rural and urban areas. End of my comments for question 1, and then Oneida Nation will also submit our written comments as well. Yawanko, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. And again, one of the things that I try to do with these consultations is just make sure that I heard the feedback appropriately in capturing this. We are establishing a record, and we use this record to build our next NOFO or to make amendments to. In the event that folks question, we look back to the record and the feedback that we had for those processes. So I want to make sure that I heard you correctly, and that will go for everybody else that shares today. First off, in relationship to the specifics of the scoring, the scoring in particular is not something that NTIA publishes or provides. However, for applicants, and again, we have not sent out notification, I should also say that, to applicants that may be unsuccessful. So applications are still under review. I want to make that point. But I do want to also share, and then I'll get into the other components that I heard, that in the event that you are an unsuccessful applicant in general, and this is for everybody on the line, we are going to open up, there is going to be a 10-day window in the event that you receive a letter from NTIA that says that you were unsuccessful and that we encourage you to apply again. And in that letter, we'll also identify a window to request the feedback from NTIA about any of the challenges that there may have been within the application. So again, I want to make sure everybody at least walks away from here understanding that we do intend to engage in discussions with applicants that that may have been unsuccessful in round one to talk about how to improve during round two. The other thing that I'll point out, and we're going to get into this in just a minute, but the next round is actually a 6-month application window. And in that 6-month application window, one of the other questions we're going to be asking is about how to provide better technical assistance. I'll remind everybody, during round one, we were in the middle of a pandemic. I think the TBCP team started off with a strong, solid 2 people, then we grew to 3 people, then we were by the time we were into technical assistance, we were up to 5. And so we now have a small army inside NTIA of predominantly indigenous people from the broadband space of over 15 people with 1 detailee, Danae Wilson, over to the White House. So we want to ensure, and we'll talk about this in a little while longer, how we can provide better boots on the ground technical assistance in round 2, now that we have a 6-month window and more bodies to assist in providing technical assistance. So in addition to streamlining, and I appreciate the feedback, and if I heard you correctly, Ms. Webster, what you shared was that it took a lot of time and resources to put the application together, and that you want to lessen the burden on the tribe, and at the bare minimum, that you should be given some level of preference for participating and going through the process in round 1, which is great. I appreciate you sharing that. And then the other thing that I thought was really important here was, in addition to looking at giving prioritization around those that applied originally, I appreciate your consideration of also those in general that have shown an initiative to move forward in their broadband space. So maybe they weren't funded in round 1, and again, clarification would be appreciated if I'm hearing you wrong. But the way I took that was, whether you applied in round 1 or not, if you're a tribe that's showing an initiative using your resources to solve the digital divide, that should count for something.
Right.
So did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to correct or you wanted to add that I may have missed for the first question?
No, you've got.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on, and we will, I know you have a few more responses to the other questions, so I know we'll hear from you a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, who do we have next?
Yep.
Matt?
Joe Garcia is up next, and then after that, Sally Finday is in the hole. So Joe Garcia.
Right. Councilman Garcia. I think we're bringing him off mute. There's usually a little bit of a delay. Councilman Garcia.
Councilman, you may come off mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
There he is. Good to hear your
Okay.
voice, Councilman.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing good, sir. Doing good.
Yeah, thank you for having, number one, I'm Joe Garcia, head councilman from Moquewingue, a small pueblo out in northern New Mexico, just about 45 miles north of the state capital, Santa Fe. Anyway, my comment for the first question, well, before I go there, I just wanted to thank you for having all of these sessions. I think it's important to continue to communicate with the tribes all throughout the nation. It's very, very important. And so I'll proceed with the answering the question. The first part of it is that if you categorize the tribes in the country, there are those that didn't apply. There are those that applied for some small amount. There are those that applied for large projects. There are some that applied and were funded at large amounts. And so when you go through that route, a lot of the initial applications, I believe, were around developing the infrastructure. And by that, I mean the middle mile and the last mile. And so if you look at the recipients, some of those have already been addressed by virtue of granting the grant to those tribes. But those that didn't receive any infrastructure bill are still stuck with having to do infrastructure. So to start a new project process and new application requirements would be, as the Navajo Nation said, a bear to get done, because if you haven't got that other infrastructure, then how are you going to build the rest of it? And so it's important to understand that logical sequence of build, and so important. And then I feel really bad for those that didn't have the opportunity to apply, because that doesn't mean that they didn't have the need. I think it just means more so that they needed more assistance in getting it developed. And so your technical assistant part, I think it's going to be a good thing. But for Okewinge and northern New Mexico, we do have the last mile provisions kind of in place. It's just a matter of building the last mile pieces, which is part of the consideration for prioritizing. Plus, it's not just equipment. You can buy all the equipment you want, but if you don't have the infrastructure, and I'll tell you which part. Our plan was involving developing fiber lines to the homes within the community. But if you don't have, you can buy the fiber, but if you don't have the part to install it, pointless. And so I think it's important to consider that it depends a whole lot on where the tribes are at this point in time. And so gathering that data and gathering that information is going to be a bear. It's not going to be easy thing, but I think it all has to do with connectivity programs. So the questions you posed are along the right lines. And so I hope that you will consider not starting a brand new process for the for the ones that have already applied, because they already have their priorities laid out, but maybe start a new one for those that have not applied at all. And how you split that dollar amount is going to be a tricky thing, but if we do it kind of 50%, 50%, that might work. I don't know, because I don't know the statistics. But anyway, that's what I offer, and I presume I will be on the other questions as well. But thank you, and if there's anything that you don't quite understand, let me know.
I will. Well, I am gonna, first off, Councilman, thank you for joining us today and for your continued advocacy and support of the needs of Indian country, your community, and you've also been a great supporter of our team, and I just want to say thank you. I hear you loud and clear in the concern that you raised about, and we have talked about this, and this is why we're consulting, is how do we treat the folks that have applied previously that maybe received or are receiving the 500,000, or maybe aren't receiving anything, and we do have some folks that that were unsuccessful in general in the application. And so, how do we work with those groups as opposed, respective tribal nations, as opposed to those that have not applied previously? And I appreciate you also acknowledging that there were folks that didn't apply. It's not because they didn't want to. It really was a resource issue at the time when they were balancing, all of the COVID related dollars and looking at they just had other priorities that took precedent. Some of them were impacted by natural disasters and just were not able to come into the process. So I hear you loud and clear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think I heard you say is that maybe we should entertain looking at breaking up the application into those that applied and those previously, and then those that did not. And I think where you're coming from is to lessen the burden and the expense on those that have previously applied, and not to just create some whole new application process. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. And then just to point out that I guess it's okay to lay out the dollars that Okewinge applied for. Our application was well over $5 million. But if you consider that we only received the 500,000, if we receive that at all, then that's 10%. So 10%, if you're going to build an infrastructure that's going to cost 5 million, and you only have 10% of that available, what can you do with it? And that's sort of where a lot of the tribes are left. Adam, thank
Yep.
you.
No, I appreciate that. I hear you there. Well, thank you, Councilman. I think I have captured there. And we have, again, this will be in the transcript and in the recording in case we do need any additional follow-up, but I appreciate the feedback, and I know we'll hear from you more on the other questions. So thank you. All
Thank
right. Matt, I think you said we had Sally Fine with Leech Lake next. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, from Leech Lake, great reservation that I'm familiar with. But anyway, and then Will Micklin is up after that. But Sally, I'm sure we'll have a couple second delay here.
Well, we better let everybody know, Matt, there was a point in time where Matt used to work for Leech Lake. How long, Matt?
I was there 2 years, and it's a great place up in northern Minnesota.
Awesome. Awesome.
Still very beautiful.
Great.
So this is Sal. Can you hear me? Are you guys ready?
We are ready. We can hear you loud and clear, Sally. If you could just give us your name, title, and the nation you're representing.
Sally Fine, grant specialist, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. So one of the things that we've encountered as we're going through this process is that as we're trying to determine for the map, the new map that's being developed, is that our tribal lands still have a lot of allotment land on it. One of the reasons that some of the companies, like for instance, Paul Bunyan, we met with them and they said, we're not coming into that area because of the fact that there's allotment land. It will take us 4, maybe 5 years to contact all the people that are required to sign on. And I said, well, for us at the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, we work closely with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I think that, with our strength as a tribal nation and our receiving, the fiber that's necessary to bring the connectivity and the control over the tribe's communications in our tribal lands, which we plan to create more, whatever. Sorry, I'm a little bit, I'm on travel, so it's difficult at this time. But I think that's what I'm trying to say is that we have to consider that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has a big control over a lot of tribal lands because of the fact that we have a lot of land and trust land. And that it takes time to come across our tribal lands. And that should be a prioritization piece, so that people know right in advance that you've got a lot of land, and we definitely have to consider that when we figure out who has priority, the length of time to outlay a plan. That's also a consideration.
Thank you, Sally. I think one of the things I'm hearing in there is just, and maybe that's something, and that might fit in even to the next question, is additional considerations we should be accounting for. We're trying to not have to run through the Paper Reduction Act. You have to go through these crazy publications. It's a government process, right? Anytime you ask anything that looks like a survey. But one of the things that I think you bring to mind, Sally, is in our process, calling out a distinct section within the NOFO, maybe in the narrative, where we ask exactly how many miles, or excuse me, exactly how many acres of allotted land are going to be encumbered or served through the proposed project. And again, I think that helps to understand the funding request, because to your point, right, that's each one of those pieces of property is going to require an appraisal and is going to have to go through its own unique environmental process unless they are adjacent. Although I know we are working on some of those items with Assistant Secretary Newland and his team, but nonetheless, I hear you in terms of making sure that we account for some of those time constraints related to permitting if we're going to look at prioritization. So with that being said, Sally, just to confirm, I think what you're concerned about is that you shouldn't be penalized if the project is going to take a little bit longer because of the unique lands that you're going to be working within. Is that a fair way to kind of encapsulate that?
Yes, Miigwech.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, great to have the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe on. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, Matt, who do we have next?
Sure. Next up, Will Micklin. And then after that, James Stevens is in the hole.
All right. Mr. Micklin. Mr. Micklin.
Hi, Adam.
There he is. How are you today, Will?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Will Micklin. Thank you. My second name is Yan Yan Ish. My English name is Will Micklin. I'm a Vice President for the Executive Council for the Central Council of Tlingit Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. We're the original tribe in Southeast Alaska. 34,000 tribal citizens in the 35,000 approximate square miles, and an applicant in round one and hopefully in round two. So thank you for the opportunity to address the question on prioritization of new projects for tribal broadband connectivity program. Oh, and for the record, I'm authorized to speak for Central Council and President Richard J. Peterson and the Executive Council. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, I expressed in the first consultation session our opinion that applications from round one should be carefully considered in round two, especially those that had not received full funding or were descoped to the 500K minimum, or that present the opportunities for providing broadband deployment to served and unserved constituents. We remember that the purpose of the program is to provide broadband deployment to served and unserved households. So we think that should remain the priority. We don't think the priority is performance. As we said in our prior remarks, that incenting higher performance leans the weight towards already served communities, although many may be underserved, but they predominantly have the infrastructure available to deploy broadband to their communities, and for many reasons that we are extremely familiar with, there's a lack of incentive for carriers to extend broadband to tribal communities that are not as high a net profit margin as other communities. So we think that falls within the mandate for the program that it sets for itself to provide broadband to served and unserved households, where that is the priority rather than speed. We see in programs like Reconnect pushing speeds up even higher, 100 by 10, 100 symmetrical, and with the opportunity to advance beyond. That's all well and great, but if you don't have service that can at least be characterized as broadband, you're never going to get to the higher speeds. We think this is also informed by the review of the applications. I know there's been some questions about the evaluations in round two, with many communities receiving a lesser amount down to 500K, not unfunded, but the 500K for many are substantially below their application request. and many have reestablished that funded amount in the lesser amount to pre-development due diligence type activities for the next funding round or other funding opportunities. And finally, we think that the evaluation between round 1 and 2 should be very careful in the state of Alaska, of all places where funding should be reduced. We feel state of Alaska as likely the least served, most remote of tribes and other eligible applicants. Really needs a hard look at getting dollars out there to at least get minimum broadband deployment performance and connectivity out to our communities. There are a lot of complications in it that are seen in that are manifest for applicants in the NTIA review, and it is no surprise to us that NTIA reviewers would be somewhat puzzled by the structure of tribal communities in Alaska. We are the regional tribe in Southeast Alaska. Tlinkits and Haidas throughout Southeast Alaska are our citizens, enrolled citizens. There's also 18 Indian Reorganization Act tribes. Their members, their tribal citizens are our tribal citizens as well as their tribal citizens. They are also shareholders. The Sea Alaska Corporation is the regional corporation. Our tribal citizens are shareholders in Sea Alaska Regional. There can also be shareholders in their village corporation. This provides a level of complexity that is not duplicated in the lower 48 and Hawaii. And it's through no fault of our own. We did not enact the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act that divided us between tribes and regional corporations and village corporations. Central Council is an Aboriginal Indigenous tribe. We won our Aboriginal lands litigation in 1958 in the Indian Court of Claims. Southeast Alaska is our Aboriginal lands, and the United States, in consenting to our trespass suit for settlement in 1935, recognized us as representing all Tlinkits and Haidas in Southeast Alaska. So that's familiar to us because we wrestle with this every day through other federal programs and opportunities. It is no surprise that this is novel for NTIA, but it is meaningful for round 2 because it was meaningful in round 1. I know there's still issues to be resolved in round 1, but we don't want round 2 to repeat the puzzlement over this type of complexity. So given that, we think that applications in 1, whether fully or partially funded, where they can demonstrate need for unserved and underserved communities to receive broadband deployment, should be the priority for NTIA. So I thank you for the opportunity, and we'll get written comments in by the end of the day. Thank you.
I was muted there. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Micklin. I really appreciate the feedback. I think the nuances of Alaska obviously remain very relevant in this conversation. And the feedback that you've provided, I think has been very helpful in terms of keeping us focused, which is, again, and I know some of you were looking at strictly middle mile projects or different types of solutions that were out there. And I appreciate the feedback that you brought back here, Mr. Micklin, which is prioritizing households. And that is an important part of the enabling legislation for the TBCP program. That's an important reason why this program exists. The number one mission that NTIA has within the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth is around connecting every single household. And that was only, it was doubled down on by the bipartisan infrastructure law, which complements the activities of this program. So I appreciate that. Also, I just want to acknowledge what you shared. For those of you that may have never worked in Alaska or new to Alaska, there's actually 2 regionally, federally recognized tribes in the state of Alaska, or excuse me, within Alaska is probably the better way to say that, that have their own unique nuances to them. And I do just want to say thank you to Will and also to ICAS, if we have members on from ICAS, for being patient and educating our team on that unique trust relationship that exists with both of those regional tribes. Again, making this process unique. So I hear you loud and clear, Mr. Micklin, that we want to prioritize homes. We definitely don't want to erode away from any tribe's sovereignty, any federally recognized tribe's sovereignty, and want to make sure that as we're thinking about even the mapping components of this and the consent components of this, how that fits within the state of Alaska. So I appreciate the sentiment, and I know the team is taking notes around this. So thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Matt, it looks like we have another speaker.
Sure. Yep. Just one in the queue right now, James Stevens. I'm sure we'll call out for other folks to raise their hands before moving on to the next question after that. But James Stevens.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is James Stevens. I'm the tribal administrator for the native village of Atka. I'm speaking on behalf of tribal leadership today because they don't have broadband in Atka and they have a hard time participating in Zoom calls. So to jump right into your questions that I heard asked, we are a first round applicant. We joined with a consortium of tribes who put in a single application for last mile connectivity. We still don't have middle mile connectivity that's adequate to our needs. We're all satellite based. We are using, right now, we're looking at an interim solution using Starlink, which just got turned on in our area. We're waiting for the equipment and are going to come up with some kind of interim distribution network so to provide affordable connectivity to our households. And I want to, I'm always reminded that the goal of the program, the stated goal, is affordable connectivity at certain speeds. And satellites do not provide the speeds and the latency, the reduced latency that gives true broadband performance. So the first round of funding for $500,000 is just for last mile. We still need the middle mile connection. To get the speeds required, as stated in the law, we need fiber optic cable. And we are 300 miles away from a fiber optic connection. So we are looking at about $30 million to connect our community with fiber. So that's our intent in the second round of funding, is to seek that $30 million because that's what it takes. As far as shovel readiness goes, I would object to inclusion of that because in our talking with the fiber people, it's an 18-month wait to get fiber. We need the money now to place the order. We need the money now to get the permitting done under NEPA, and that's an expensive proposition. We don't have the money laying around to hire an engineer to design a $30 million project. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, we're so far out there that it's, nobody wants to provide a service. The limited service we get is expensive. For example, we're still being throttled down, after we've reached a data cap. so that we cannot sit in on Zoom meetings. I'm in Anchorage, I have good connection. Out in Atka, they don't have it. It gets expensive. Their bill goes from, you know, 100 a month up to 600 a month if you exceed the data cap. The problem is with these internet service providers that are operating statewide, you know, they receive hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies to build out the systems and tens of millions of dollars in operating subsidies through the Universal Service Fund. Yet we're still charged upwards of $600 a month if we exceed data caps. So these are the issues that we're trying to address. We need the funding. We need it in the second round. And we're not afraid to put out, you know, there's the Reconnect program out right now. That's got $1 billion in it. I'm hearing there's another $1 billion being put out in the tribal broadband connectivity program. But the issue is connectivity is vital to our survival as a community, economic survival. And so that's what we need, is we need the understanding that, you know, a small tribe like Atka actually does need $30 million to get the connectivity it needs to join the world. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Mr. Stevens, just for clarification in the location of the village of Atka, you guys are out in the Aleutian chain, correct?
Yes, we are. We are the furthest western tribe in the United States. It costs us just to get to Anchorage. It's $2,800 round trip.
Yeah.
And we have flights 3 times a week. Yeah, we are way out there.
Gotcha. And what's your proximity to Unalaska?
300 miles away.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's going to be the closest fiber node. That's one of them. There's another company that's doing a project from Nome to Homer. We'd rather connect with them because they seem more reasonable in their pricing structures. They're not one of those companies that have been just leeching money from all the communities. It's important that tribes own the middle mile so that we can have the anchor tenants like the schools and the clinics. That's why it's important for tribes and local governments to own that middle mile. We do not need these outside internet service providers to come in and just take our money and deliver poor service.
You raised, I think, you've raised a lot of really good points. And I guess first off, I just want to acknowledge, one, thank you for delivering the feedback on behalf of the village. You just raised a very real reality, which is sometimes people have to delegate the authority because they just don't have the access to be able to show up and do it over these platforms. So I appreciate you carrying the message on behalf of the leadership there. I hear you. You don't have broadband, and I just want to make sure I captured the points here. You're currently looking at a temporary solution, waiting on equipment. The 500,000. I want to point out that the up to 500,000 equitable distribution can be used for more than just last mile. It can be used for a whole host of things. But I will say the caveat is we have to keep it within the parameters of what was in the original application. That's the nuance that the lawyers have kept me to. But I recognize that a $30 million cost is a real cost. And it's not just the cost of getting the service there, from what I'm hearing you say, it's the cost of actually paying for it in general. I just came back from a trip with Assistant Secretary Davidson. We were up in Tanana, we went out to Kodiak. We went over to the Bethel region and up and down the river out there. And I really can truly appreciate the challenges that you guys are facing. And from an affordability standpoint, I mean, as you mentioned, even after subsidies, I saw an $1,800 a month bill from some of the households in the Bethel region that made me fall out of my chair a little bit. And so those are the realities that you're facing. So I hear you on the cost component. So it brings me to ask you a couple questions. Should we be looking at affordability as a prioritization in this process? And then also, should we be giving preference to applicants that where there is tribal ownership in this? So not just where they're contracting out to somebody, but where there's a true partnership or where they're doing it on their own so that there's a benefit. Do you believe that we should be looking at prioritizing in that fashion?
Thanks for pitching the softball.
Hey,
Yes,
you went,
yes.
well, you went there. I mean, I think that's where
Yeah.
you're headed, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure I capture it for the
Let's,
record.
okay. Yes, I think prioritization should be made to for tribal ISPs. Tribally owned ISPs. The second question about affordability, I think affordability a tribe shouldn't have to document affordability or a plan for making it affordable. I think the recognition should be that a tribally owned ISP would provide the services to the schools and clinics in the communities, which would cover your basic operating costs, including your connectivity to the fiber nodes. And then, I mean, I was setting up in villages back in the mid 2000s with broadband solutions. And we were happy to get 1.5 megs down and 0.5 meg up. We thought we were really cruising along. But the reality is that once you have those anchor tenants like a school or a clinic, that covers all your costs. What you charge the individual users, the residential users, to put it bluntly, is chump change. You know, you don't need to charge them that much because you have your anchor tenants.
Understood. Okay.
Did that answer all your questions? know
I
there's a
think
few
so.
of them.
I think I hear you loud and clear on looking at the prioritizations and I appreciate you addressing the cost component of that. Right. I mean, that's a big part of sustainability is another area that we've looked at for prioritization. And really what I'm hearing you highlight there is the sustainability component of this, that giving preference to those that can give a true demonstration, maybe not of affordability, but demonstrated through sustainability and a continuance in that practice. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we continue to move on, Mr. Stevens?
No, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak and answer questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to the Native Village of Atka for joining us today. Appreciate that. Okay, Matt, how are we doing?
No one new in the chat, but I don't know, Adam, if it'd be worthwhile to mention our middle mile program for a second, since I feel like that was relevant to the last conversation.
Yeah, good point. So we have, I guess for everybody on the line, there's a few different programs in addition to the TBCP, where direct funding is available to tribes as well. There is the middle mile program at NTIA, and the window is actually closing here, I think at the end of the month, if not in the next week or two. So it's a pretty tight turnaround, but many of you have already have a straw man of the application. So I do want to point out that there's an opportunity there. Also that in addition to the tribal broadband program, there is what's called the BEAD program. And if you guys are attending the Department of Interior Broadband Summit, we did an overview of the program, but essentially it's $42.5 billion that is going out to the states, and that it is not direct funding to tribes from the federal government, but the states can fund tribes directly. And we're requiring every state to address how they intend to connect, and are asking them to connect every unserved household in the country. And that includes on tribal lands. And that also means that there's tribal consent. And so for my friends on the line here in Alaska, I really hope in addition to this program, you are digging in deep with the governor's office in the state of Alaska and the team that is there. And for my colleagues and relations in the lower 48, I also would suggest the same thing, that there is obviously direct funding is always the best approach. Again, former tribal leader, I always wanted the money direct from the federal government. That is always the best approach in maintaining that relationship. However, again, what the government did here was they put the dollars into the state and are requiring them to have a plan, and tribes are supposed to be included in that plan, and tribes are supposed to consent to how they're going to be served in that plan. So there's another pot of money out there in addition to this that I'm happy to share. In fact, We're going to be standing up a tribal broadband leaders network that, as Mr. Matt Rogoski, as you see on here, will be helping facilitate that, where we can share more information about who your respective point of contact would be in your neighboring state. So again, there's other pots. I appreciate you raising that, Matt. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the next.
Actually, it looks like we got a couple new hand raises from
good.
Lisa Sutherland was up, and then Councilmember Joe Garcia was back up again. So maybe hear from Lisa first there.
All right, Lisa.
Lisa, you can unmute.
All right.
There we
Okay.
go.
Here we
So,
go.
If you could, name, title, and the tribe that you're speaking on behalf of.
Sure. My name is Lisa Sutherland. I work with the Alaska Federation of Natives, and we earlier submitted a consortium application. And I am the lead federal navigator and also a telecommunications lawyer. I had two questions. One is in terms of in reading through the Dear Tribal Leader letter, and it said 25% of tribes had not applied. Would you consider publishing a list as part of your NOFA of the tribes that did not apply? Because we've had so much turnover among our tribal administrators. Honestly, there's a lot of people who don't know what they applied for, and there are just so many grant opportunities. So I think that might be helpful for tribes and maybe even for you if you are going to prioritize those tribes who did not apply during the first round. And then secondly, and I know you're aware of this, and we're not necessarily saying that this should be a priority, but you might consider calling out in the NOFA the new opportunity that tribes have for tribal libraries. After the first NOFA finished up September 1st of last year, in January, I believe it was January 27th or something like that, the FCC ruled that tribes can have tribal libraries that are paid for with USF funds, up to 90% of their broadband costs. So if there could be some consideration given to help tribes, we have of our 229 tribes, we have only 56 have tribal libraries, and only 4 until recently had the E-rate program, which paid for their broadband. And if you can get in that program, it goes on forever. It's not funded through the appropriations process. And you also get $25,000 for equipment. So if we could do that, at least in Alaska, I don't know, there might be lower 48 tribes already have tribal libraries, but every single one of them could have a computer center. They could have Zoom rooms to do calls, to do classes, to do work from home, all kinds of things until we can get this infrastructure built, which is going to take, a number of years. So I hope that might be something. And then the other thing is, even to sign up for the E-rate program, I worked for the member of Congress, Senator Stevens, who wrote the E-rate program, and I couldn't even figure out how to do an application for AFN. And not to say that I'm the brightest bulb in the pack, but if a telecommunications lawyer can hardly figure it out, it's hard for tribes to do. We have one E-rate coordinator in Alaska who does all our schools and all our other libraries. She's helped a couple tribal libraries. So if we could get 1 or 2 people who could help tribes take advantage of this opportunity, it becomes self-sustaining. So I hope as you're considering how you're going to structure your NOFO, you will give some thought to how tribal libraries could be incorporated. And then there's also separate money that funds the tribal library through other agencies. So that was all I wanted to share.
No, I think, Lisa, I appreciate the feedback. I think that's a good point of consideration and prioritization, because that library, I think, even as we just heard from the Village of Atka, can serve as a what was the term that the gentleman used, Mr. Stevens used, anchor tenant, I think is how he described it.
100%, 100%.
So-
Because then they get all that money coming in, even if it takes some time to try to get the schools and libraries, they can get an anchor tenant through the library. And
Yep.
it's exclusively a tribal library. So by definition, it's, it's theirs. They pick the vendor, even if they can pick themselves as the vendor.
So I don't know, and again, this will be some things we have to think about internally with the team, but I think that there's a big difference, I imagine, in E-rate funding subsidies for Alaska connectivity as opposed to lower 48. So it makes me think about maybe a customization approach for Alaskan applicants that be a component. And I didn't realize it was only 56 of the over 200 federally recognized tribes in Alaska. So that's a
Well, they have tribal libraries, but only 4 have signed up for the E-rate program because it was too dang hard. And
gotcha.
now they're finally eligible, but your eligibility for E-rate depends on your uptake for the school lunch program. So if you're on a reservation and you have high use of the school lunch program, you're going to get closer to that 90%. And
Gotcha.
most of our tribes are in the 80 to 90% category.
Understood. All right. Well, Lisa, I appreciate the feedback and thank you for I think putting a component on the table in terms of prioritization, especially from the Alaskan lens. That makes a lot of sense. And then your question about publishing a list of those who didn't apply.
Mhm.
I don't know that I can understand why you're asking it. And I
Yeah.
appreciate how
And
you
you want to help
articulated
those
it.
who didn't apply to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to leave any money on the table. And I should say, we are absolutely intending for those that didn't apply or didn't receive the up to 500,000. We're
Right.
absolutely intending to keep that in the next round, and you don't want to leave money on the table. I can get that.
Right.
I need to
Yeah.
see. I need to see. I don't know the answer to it, but I think that's something worth considering.
Or
That's something
maybe
worth
even doing
considering.
outreach. If you guys did it, I can understand it. Tribes might not like that information public, but
Yeah.
you could, if you guys could let them know, hey, you're eligible for this, if you want help, and even if you wanted to say AFN's available, if you'd like to work with them to help you and get up to speed on this program and help you apply. So that would be another option.
Okay.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate the feedback, Lisa, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to AFN for joining us today.
Yeah, and this will be in our written comments, by the way.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
And I guess I should also just state for the record, we just have a working knowledge. AFN does have authorization to speak on behalf of a number of villages that they are currently working with and representing in the TVCP program, in case any of you are wondering. Okay, so with that being said, Alaska Federation of Natives, we have, it looks like one more speaker in the box. Is it Mr. Garcia?
Actually, 2 now. Mr.
Okay.
Garcia and then Mr. Joe Williams is after that.
Mr. Garcia, I think you can come off of mute.
Yeah, I finally got the logistics of how you get online right quick. Got to switch as a guest, I guess. Anyway, thank you for the time. I just wanted to allude the people that are speaking about the middle mile. I heard some good comments from Alaska about they want to do their own middle mile, and I'll tell you from experience that northern New Mexico engaged in a middle mile project during the era funding under President Obama. And the project was a success. It's still successful. And we're running off of part of that as we're connecting to the last mile, but the last mile parts are important. And so I want to send a warning out to the people that want to own their own middle mile that right now we're only talking about the infrastructure funding. We're not talking about anything else, I don't believe, because you have to have that middle mile. So the last mile doesn't make any sense unless you have a middle mile or you have an interim like the satellite part that they were talking about. But in terms of doing the infrastructure, everyone has talked about infrastructure. And so in the infrastructure or in the broadband affordability. Number one, you had to have the development design part of it. You had to have the engineering design for the middle mile. You have to have the design for the last mile. And then once you've got the system set up, whether it be fiber, Wi-Fi, whatever it is, you had to go into operations. Now, we've not even talked about operations, folks. So when you talk about, okay, we've got the middle mile now done, and who built it, who owns it, who's going to operate it, and where are you going to get the operational funds? So it's the same with the last mile providers. The tribe can do the last mile themselves if they had the personnel, but they have to be funded. Those personnel has to be funded. If they don't have the fund to support IT, then you're kind of stuck with the infrastructure and nobody run it. So it's kind of the all-around look that I'm looking at, and I think many tribes aren't considering that. They're just laying one piece of the infrastructure, and they need to worry about the entire train. So if you connect to some point in Alaska that provides the fiber, and I think I heard the $30 million cost for laying fiber from in northern New Mexico. We're talking about expanding some fiber for the middle mile. We're talking about like $275,000 a mile. If you got 300 miles to go, the cost is probably higher up in Alaska. If I could say double the price, then we've got some problems. So that middle mile is kind of going to be like, it's a pie in the sky, and I don't know if it's doable. So, but in understanding for the tribal leaders that are online and for others, I think it's important to consider all those elements that I just listed. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate there are a lot of experience there in lessons learned. I think that Councilman just shared, right, in terms of thinking about it. If you're going to take on that operation and maintenance component of that, how are you going to do that, and really making sure, I think we're back to that sustainability prioritization. So I appreciate that, council member. Okay, well, let's we have a few more minutes here, and I'm going to we're spending some time on this because I think prioritization is a big deal with this remaining $1 billion. So I really do want to appreciate and acknowledge all of the feedback that we've heard so far today. A lot of good pieces to think about. And we have, I think, one more speaker or two more.
Yep, two more. Yeah, Joe Williams and then Nate Tyler after that.
Okay. And then from there, we're going to move on into the second question. So with that, Joe Williams. Joe, I think you should be able to come off of mute.
Good morning. I'm sorry. Is it good now?
You're good now. Name, title, and the tribe that you were speaking on behalf of, please, Mr. Williams.
My name is Joe Williams, Jr. I'm the president of the Organized Village of Saxman, which is a federally recognized tribe. All that's being said here today, I'm very brand new to this process, and I would like, I'm of the opinion, because I don't know a lot, there's a lot of money that we're missing. And I could gather by this call, and I appreciate you putting it on. So the young lady from AFN, if I could get some kind of guidance in how to be able to apply for that, I certainly would appreciate it. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you so much, President Williams, for providing the comment in it. And, one thing that for the team, President, if you don't mind putting your contact information in the chat box, I also think we have it on the back end. I think we can get you the information and tied in with the FCC and the E-rate program that Ms. Sutherland was speaking to. And Lisa, I imagine you'd be able to reach out. I know you're pretty knowledgeable in this space if that's something I know AFN is a great partner up there, and I imagine you'd be happy to do that as well. But President Williams, our team will be following up with you to do a handoff with our sister federal agency over at the FCC. And thank you for joining us today. All right, we have next, was it
Nate Tyler.
Nate Tyler? All right, wonderful. We'll just give it a second here. And is Nate Tyler off of mute?
Ricky's coming in.
Okay,
Adam, can you hear me?
there we go. All
Okay,
right.
I didn't have any buttons to unmute or anything, so I was just added as a panelist. Appreciate this, Adam. Nate Tyler, I'm the treasurer of the Makah tribe in Washington State. And I'm requesting to just make a handful of comments right now. I'm one of two council members right now meeting with the Washington State governor and his some of his top staff. So so I got to get back into my meeting. So if I can just make a handful of comments, I'd appreciate that, Adam.
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, thanks a lot for allowing that. I guess my topics that I want to discuss or bring forward is about I guess equality or inequality. It's something that we face as tribes across the board when it comes to funding or funding mechanisms or whatever the case, pass-through monies, state monies intended for tribes. But just to have a fair playing field, I think, for all tribes throughout the U.S. A lot of the smaller tribes miss out on any kind of opportunities for whatever reason. They don't have the staff, the resources, or whatever the case is. And it reflects back to who's been funded. So I'd like to, see moving forward, working together, trying to figure out how we can best utilize this funding, get the money out to the tribes as fast as we can, and to have a fair system in place that benefits all tribes. Prioritizing the equitable distribution towards all the recipients is my first point. Prioritizing those who were not funded in round one. Separate the larger tribes from the smaller tribes, ensuring the comparison is equitable. Like I said, it's kind of unfair for a lot of the smaller tribes. We see this across the board, Adam. Not just in this case, but we see it in the healthcare field. We see it in, everything, law enforcement, you name it. So it really is unfair, towards the smaller tribes competing against the larger tribes. I don't know what the answer is, but it'd be nice to work together, to come up with some solutions on how that can be done. Advocate for exemption from the Build America, Buy America requirement. The supply chain's already choked, and much of the needed equipment's imported. That was one of my biggest fears when this was coming down the pipeline. All this money, there's a lot of money, but there's not enough money. But even though all this money is coming down the pipelines, knowing that supply chain, what it's going to do to the supply chain, and then also once tribes get that money here, it's going to be hard finding. It's going to be harder moving forward. As far as contractors and supplies and all that. So I think we got to think about that. That was one of my biggest fears right off the bat. Like I said, when this came down the pipeline. prioritize infrastructure projects over use and adoption projects. Do not prioritize higher network speeds. Once again, this is putting the larger tribes who are in a position wherever they're at regionally, closer to urban areas, existing infrastructure, the middle mile, rural, remote tribes don't have that same access. And especially here at Makah, we're about as remote as you can get. We've been working on this issue for quite a few years now. And we're still coming across barriers. We're still in a position where we don't have equitable access to internet, basic utility. So, so I think, just the point of this funding, really should be to level the playing field, and we have a number of tribes up and down the coast that's in the same position as the Makah tribe. We have a number of tribes on the east side of the mountains in Washington State that's in the same position as the Makah tribes. That's known, but just to, level that playing field. So, at a certain point, we're all doing exactly what this program's intent was set up to do, and having the access, whether it's in education or the health field, mental health, telehealth, you name it. So I think that's really important. Technical assistance, NTIA should work with applicants on mapping, and possibly providing mapping workshops to create shape files, which would increase the applicants' capacity. So, but once again, I just appreciate this opportunity to provide some comments through this platform, and the Makah tribe will follow up with a written comment soon. So once again, just appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Treasurer Tyler, thank you. And thank you to the Makah tribe for being here, and best wishes on your meeting with the governor. Real quick, I just want to make sure that I captured everything. And if I missed anything or you need to correct it, just let me know. I think the first thing you brought up was making sure that we come up with a way that this is equitable, where the funding mechanism isn't destructive to tribes that may be smaller, whether it be population or land base. You still would like to also see things moving quickly, and in that same vein, giving priority to those that applied essentially in round one that have received or will be receiving the 500,000, or maybe weren't funded but applied. We have talked about, I'll just share with you, and I heard you share this. We have talked about looking at separating a bucket of money for the larger tribes and the smaller tribes, because there really are just different dynamics involved. And that we've even talked about having an Alaskan pot of money, because everything is just so different in Alaska. So I hear you there. I think we'll explore to see if there's a way to do it equitably. I'll be honest, a former tribal leader myself, I don't think I've seen any agency truly hit a home run on how to really address it, but I'm game to try it. And we'll see if there's something else that we can augment here. Exemption from the Build America, Buy America. I heard you loud and clear there, and I appreciate you sharing that sentiment. To be candid, we've heard that from all three consultations now. We're going to probably hear it when we get to those other questions later on. But you're saying that tribes should be exempt mainly because the supply chain issues haven't caught up. And then the other piece that you left was prioritizing infrastructure over broadband use and adoption. And I appreciate you giving that guidance. That is another thing the team has really debated is, and we wanted to consult on the topic first, should there be priorities? We've heard others say infrastructure is the priority right now. The use and adoption activities are great, but when so many people can't get online, how do you hand out funds to do broadband use and adoption activities over that? So I think we'll have to chat with our lawyers honestly about that topic, but I do believe that that's definitely on the table. So thank you for sharing. And then hear you loud and clear that the program goals is to level the playing field. That's right. It's to try to deliver this program in a way that's equitable to connect unserved households, which is no easy task. And lastly, I appreciate the guidance on the workshops for mapping. And for the rest of you, we're going to get into this question. And again, I know Treasurer Tyler has to run, but we are going to be talking about that in a moment. Is increasing more detailed maps. We have to use those maps to review for duplication with our other federal agencies. And sometimes folks were sending in pictures, JPEGs, or PDFs, and we need the more intelligent files to be able to interact with other software and program that we use. So I appreciate the feedback on saying, you know, that we could use this as a capacity building activity given the larger windows. So is there anything else that you wanted to add, Treasurer Tyler, that I may have missed or misunderstood?
No, I don't, nothing more to add. Just, you know, appreciate everything you guys been doing up to this point. I know you guys' job's pretty tough. You know, you guys get beat up quite a bit. Your staff get beat up quite a bit over what you guys been doing. You know, but I fully understand we're working with what we got. So I do appreciate your staff and everything you guys have done. So, and once again, just appreciate you letting me hop on and express my concerns through comment here. So thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate the feedback on the team. I know they'll appreciate the support. So thank you so much for being here today, Treasurer Tyler and the Macaw Tribe. All right. Well, Matt, I don't think anybody else popped up in the queue, so we are going to run on to question number 2.
You got it.
All right. That was a pretty good question number 1, but hey, that's the meat and potatoes, right? Some of these other questions I think are just as important, but that priority discussion really matters. I mean, our team has really been talking about how we best approach, you know, the landscape that we're working in for this next billion. So thank you to everybody that provided comment for question 1, and any of you that are submitting feedback in a written format. Thank you again. Okay, so what type of guidance or documentation can be included in addition to the NOFO that would assist applicants in completing their application? So one of the things that we've talked about is, and we weren't able to get it done in through clearance before releasing the last NOFO, but we would like to have sample application materials, right? Here's a sample 424 form, here's a sample budget narrative. Are there other types of materials that would be helpful that we should be including in this next NOFO? Also, are there things that need to be more clear? I'll just share with you, others have previously shared with us that it would be good to have more concise definitions regarding different aspects of the NOFO, which is fair. Again, this is really meant to understand, you know, are there things that we need to do with the NOFO or additional resources or documentation that we should be including in this next round to improve? Lastly, this is also in relationship to that mapping discussion. We are thinking about adding, since it's a 6-month window, you know, should we be considering requiring, and I guess I use the word requiring, that more detailed shape file, an Esri shape file, or there's a couple of other formats, but essentially a little bit more than a standard PDF when we're talking about network diagrams that folks are submitting. And do you believe that that would be a burden if we were to do so? Or do you believe that that's something that would be coachable, and that, and our team, by the way, stands ready to help do that education and capacity building? I loved how Treasurer Tyler put that forward. You know, our team is here to build capacity with you. And so those are that's question number 2. What type of guidance or documentation can be included in addition to the NOFO or within the NOFO to assist applicants in completing their application? So that is the question. We have, it looks like Councilman Garcia in the queue.
Yep, we'll get him off mute, and then we'll track others as they make their way into the queue with their hands up.
Sounds good. Councilman Garcia.
Thank you, Adam. I've been promoted.
All right.
Yeah, Joe Garcia, head councilman, Okewinge. First and foremost, I think that depending on who the tribe is, it's important to understand is the application sent by a grant writer, or is it sent by a committee within the tribe, or is it sent by IT people, or maybe an engineering firm? Uh, it's hard to understand what the need might be depending on where the tribes are coming from. And as I said before, it's not just infrastructure, it's all the elements that make from the hot point in a city all the way down to the last user at the tribal level. And I heard the young lady speak about the library forms, and I don't remember her saying anything about that there was already a middle mile for library rates, E-rates. And if you don't have that connection, like E-rate is kind of useless. And so I think some of the more remote areas, they may have a library, but they have no connectivity. And so those kinds of guidances are important. And how do you get that to be a universal approach to the tribes that are lacking those resources? So the question becomes, okay, if I'm a tribal member and I know a little bit about IT, even though you might do a webinar on what it takes to develop from the city point to the last mile, the last house, and you provide the webinar via electronic through internet. If I don't have internet, how in the world am I going to know? How am I going to get connected to these kinds of webinars? And I believe that some of the tribes are in that very same boat. And unless there is a way to address that is why, Adam, I said, I feel for those tribes that did not submit any application. And they're probably in this boat that I'm talking about. And so when we're talking about equity, right? Equitable distribution, those tribes are left out completely. And I heard Nate talk about, even though they're not completely remote, because he was able to zoom in on this session, he cited that some of the tribes themselves are in that boat. And so how we get that across would be an important thing, but that kind of guidance, I think, is important. And even when you distribute it online, if you say a Dear Tribal letter via email to a tribal leader in a remote area that doesn't really have internet, complete internet, you've done missed the boat, because that tribe will not hear that unless you send it snail mail. I don't remember how long it takes now for snail mail, but it's well over a week, depending on where you are. And so by the time everything kind of gets through and people learn about this, it's almost like, if you're gonna take physics with calculus, you better have had calculus 1 before you go into physics with calculus.
Right.
So the preliminary things, I think the prerequisite to know about what is required for internet and broadband are must point. They are prerequisites. And unless you know what it takes to develop a complete working system, it's not going to happen. And we're still fighting that part. And I sort of going through and developing a course to do that. I think that's what the guidelines should provide. And I've worked with the National Telecommunication Native Task Force for Communication. We did provide a handbook, and I think some of that handbook is available over at FAA or FFC. I'm sorry. That might help to guide people to looking at what is needed. So that would be additional thing, but it requires a lot of reading, a lot of planning, a lot of developing. And so spur of the moment, but The last option I would provide is when you have television, let's say direct TV, how in the world did people know about direct TV? It was the infrastructure was already there. It's just the service is provided, right? And so people know about it. So how can we get that same kind of message through the people in need? And I don't know the people that don't have broadband, if they have direct TV or satellite TV or whatever they've got, but that might be an approach to getting the information out. So it's a little bit more work for NTIA to get the message across to everybody that should be submitting. But that's just a thing. And the other consideration would be there are specific pieces that can be developed without a tribe having to do their own design and work. Develop a system. They've already been done. The last mile providers have already designed system, the kind of equipment, the kind of connection, the kind of power they need, and all of that. It's already been tested and it worked in all kinds of communities. So why not have that as a sample? That's your sample. So you say, you build all these things, this is what it would be. And then you don't have to start from scratch and designing. It's already a done deal. And that's how we worked in the past before. Somebody develops a system and it's this system, it contains these pieces, and you just lay it out there and plug it in and away you go. And the connectivity part is the last thing that you still have to worry about is how is it connected to the last mile provider, and how is that last mile provider then connected to the middle mile. So it's still the same question about infrastructure development, and all the pieces have to be there. Thank you for the bit of time, but those are suggestions that I have.
And Councilman, I think I think there was a lot there. And, what it does make me stop and pause and think about is the timing of the next NOFO and what our team can do on the front end before we release the NOFO, so people can really use that 6-month window to fine tune their proposals. And you're right. I think you just laid out a really good example of, you're right. Sometimes people think this is rocket science, and it's not rocket science. They just don't know the pieces and where they fit. But I think most people can conceptualize, no different than how water comes into your home or how roads are connected. In a lot of ways, fiber networks or high-speed internet networks aren't necessarily conceptually any different. So what can our team do? You made me really think about a few different things here in terms of timing, and then what can our team do ahead of the release of the next NOFO from a planning perspective and then from an education perspective to build capacity, and not have people recreate the wheel. Because I think you're right. The folks that didn't apply for a whole host of reasons, but I can also just assume it was because it wasn't something quick and easy that they could slap together like maybe some of the other programs that they're used to working in. So how can we bridge that gap? Lot to think about there, Head Councilman, and I want to thank you for that feedback. I think that was really insightful. And again, highlighting the FCC handbook, we at NTIA also have a toolkit. Macy, do you mind dropping the toolkit in the chat for everybody that's online? We have something similar that walks people through it. Still doesn't have the level of detail, Councilman, that I think you were getting at in calling out every aspect of the network and a network diagram that we would want to see. So again, I think just a lot of great words there. Anything else you want to add before we move on to the next speaker?
No, just it would be nice to, it's again, you'll send us the note, but those that can't get online won't have that document. Okay.
Right.
So I think it for some of us, it's the same continued effort for us to close the gap with those tribes that are not on this call today. I think I'm the only one from the Southwest area, so I will try to send the information much as I can. And it's called reaching out. So
I got
I'll
you.
do my part if you guys will do your part. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Head Councilman. Thank you. All right, Matt, who do we have next?
I saw a Fred McLaughlin, but I think his hand's down now, so not sure if he is back up. All right, Fred McLaughlin, we'll get you in the speaking capacity in just a second.
Right, Fred. There we go.
Can you hear me okay?
There we go, Mr. McLaughlin. Your name, title, and the tribe you are representing today.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Fred McLaughlin. I am a general manager for Standard Rock Telecommunications, to which I am a tribal member as well. Our company is owned and operated by the Standard Rock Sioux tribe, 100% owned by it. And we've been in operation since 2009 as a wireless ETC with the FCC. So we are able to receive programs such as Lifeline and a high cost support and such like that. First thing is thank you for allowing me to talk. Thank you for President for invocation earlier. I just wanted to comment on this question about really it comes down to literacy and tribes and such like that, because not a lot of tribes know exactly what broadband and the title of broadband and all that encompasses with it. You know, for example, our sister tribe, Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in Eagle Butte, South Dakota, they are a wireline company that they do broadband. We're a wireless company that does broadband. So it's very, very different for each tribe. And obviously that echoes the needs as well. I just kind of wanted to comment out there that the FCC does have a ONAP office of Native American programs and policy, I think that's what it's called. And I know that they have tools as well. And like you said, and you know, the FCC just finished doing a broadband collection map in which every broadband provider had to show exactly what services they provided and the mapping of where they provided at. So I don't know when that will be completed and compiled. I know there are some companies out there that are still submitting their data, but I expect that to be sometime soon. So for those tribes that want to talk about mapping and different things like that, about what's all there, and I think that is a helpful tool here soon to be published that tribes can look at with the FCC. And I just like to thank you for the time, and I'd like to kind of echo the words of a previous speaker, a councilman from a northern. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the tribe, but I just thought that the needs is very different for each tribe, and I think you guys did a good job with the first one. Personally, I think you did a good job, and I to leave it vague is hard to do when tribes have a specific need, but I think a little bit more resources and such like that is needed. But you know, there's only so much you can do with what's out there as is right now. So like I said, I appreciate the time and encourage everybody to keep going.
Appreciate that, Mr. McLaughlin, and thank you to the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe for joining us today. And frankly, the work you guys are doing, it's some impressive stuff out there. Definitely a leader in the broadband space. Some of you will start to also hear the term high-speed internet being used in lieu of broadband. The way it was described by the administration, and I think it's fair, is we all have kids, and sometimes when the internet goes out, or if you don't have internet at all, but the kids, maybe they have it at school, they don't say, oh, we lost our broadband. They say, the internet isn't working. And I noticed that even with my own children. I have a microwave service that serves my home. and wireless service. And that's exactly how they describe it. They don't say dad, the broadband went out. So to your point, Mr. McLaughlin, this is a education around around the terms of the space and providing a level of education to improve the literacy, I think, of all tribal nations, because it's in many ways, it really is, it's vernacular. I think that the concepts here are absolutely teachable, coachable, learnable. Tribes are already doing these things. It's the terms that we need to help with. So I think I'm just continuing to hear more and more on this topic, that the need for continuing education in the lead up to or educational materials during the next round, separate and apart from the NOFO, maybe not as attached to the NOFO, but to really level set is something that we need to do. And that, I think, also gets us into the next question. If there isn't anybody else in the queue, Matt. It isn't. Well, let's go ahead and go on to the next slide, because I think we're right on topic with the next question, which has to do with technical assistance, and how can we provide better technical assistance to improve timely and complete submissions. Now, again, round one, we had 90 days frankly, to educate everybody. We had a new team, we had new applicants, we had a new rule from the NOFO with a new program, with new funding, all happening in the middle of a pandemic. And this round, we have a little bit more time. We have a 6-month window as opposed to a 90-day shot clock. Now, I will say that in that 6-month time frame, some of the things we've been talking about, because there will be the opportunity to provide more technical assistance, is tightening up the application a little bit more. So we're not so broad, right? I think we cast a very wide net, which resulted in a lot of curing, if I'm just going to be honest here, which I think was appropriate. We needed to do. The law asks us to do. But in the same vein, we also know that impacted timelines, and there was frustration from many of you about how long this program has taken to get dollars on the street. And so that's what this question is really intended to tackle, is what are things that we can do from a technical assistance standpoint? And I think we just heard a couple, but if there's other ideas as well, we'd love to hear them, to ensure not just a timely submission, but that the application is complete in a way that will lessen the curing on the back end, so we can get the dollars out faster. So are there any other ideas, foods for thought around how we can improve? I've heard mapping was brought up by the treasurer from Macaw, doing mapping workshops and building capacity. I think we definitely heard that there's a need to ensure that the way we deliver technical assistance, Zoom isn't going to cut it. I think Head Councilman Garcia has made that very clear. Many tribes are still operating on, as he shared, snail mail, which means that maybe our technical assistance in some regions is really going to have to be boots on the ground, and bush planes and boats, and that may be the case. I think we also heard the need to how we can also work with our sister agencies with their resources in tandem to help build that capacity in preparation. So I guess I really am wondering, are there things that we can improve upon, or other ideas that you may have that fit your respective communities in the way that you learn, or the way in which we can help from a technical assistance standpoint on the next application, where things were where maybe boots on the ground or more engagement would have been helpful. So that is the question. How can we help? How can technical assistance from NTIA be improved to ensure timely and complete submissions? So how are we doing, Matt? Anybody in the queue?
Not yet, but yeah, can let folks think about it for a sec.
Okay. While we're waiting for hands to come into the queue, and maybe we won't, and that's okay. I did see that there were a few questions that were posed as well. The first one was the for NT Robert Beaver, NTBG opportunity due 10/17. Under feasibility study or environmental survey, is NEPA allowable? Robert, if you don't mind just shooting the team an email, I think what we'd like to do is follow up with you to understand more of the details around the specific program that you're speaking to. so we can get you in touch with the right program team. We at NTIA, the tribal broadband program, have nothing due on October 17th. That's a separate program, I think, what you're referencing. I just want to make sure we get the details. So if you don't mind putting your contact information in the chat, and we'll follow up with you afterwards. Trent Larson asked, are awards granted during the 6-month window, or are all awards granted after the 6-month filing window? That's a good question. We had some tribes previously say, hey, for TBCP, if we get our application in the moment the window opens, or in the first week or so, can you award based upon who submits first? And the answer is no. We have to wait for that full 6-month window to close until we're able to then engage in making any type of awards. We have to close the application window. So unfortunately, we are not able to make awards on a first come first. I shouldn't say unfortunately. The way the program works, we're not able to make awards on a first come first served basis. So hopefully that was helpful for Mr. Larson. Tori Castleberry asked, could tribes applying for funding in the second round of TBCP get priority preference if they did not receive funding and or the $500,000 minimum in the first round? I'm going to answer your question with a question, which is, do you believe that tribes should? I think we've definitely heard feedback there. Tori, feel free to, if you'd like to send in written comment on what you believe you'd like. That's really what this session is about, is for you to tell us your position and what is most advantageous for your tribe, or for all tribes for that matter. Brittany Wind, many tribes put a lot of work into round 1 application cycle for TBCP. While we are waiting for pending awards, denials, or answers on who the additional funds will be handed by NTIA, would it be best practice to continue applying through other funding sources available, such as the Middle Mile program or RUS, et cetera? Yes. So I realize that there is an expense, and I do want to just acknowledge that I don't want to sound flippant when I say, please apply for everything. But I am going to say that if broadband is your priority, which I believe many of you on this call is 100% is, this is an unprecedented time in our country's history where this level of investment is being made into infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and in particular, obviously broadband or high-speed internet. And so I'm going to encourage you to apply. Again, recognizing that there is an expense and a time and a capital component to this, but I am going to encourage you to apply for everything that is out there. Let us at the government sort out on the back end if there is duplication or issues that we need to work through, which we do. We meet with the FCC, the USDA, and even Treasury on at a minimum once a week to be talking about projects, programs, and potential duplication. So if you're worried, hey, what happens is we'll come talk to you if you're awarded through both programs, and we'll figure out what makes the most sense for you. And again, I don't want to overly speak for my colleagues at the other agencies, but the working relationship that we have on ensuring non-duplication and maximizing the benefit to tribes has been very intentional. And I think everybody has been very honest in their and forthright in their approach to do what's right for Indian country in this process. All right, so Matt, any hands up in the queue?
Not yet. Yeah. Maybe perhaps covered a lot in the first couple of sessions.
I think so. I think so, and that's okay. So if I'll just say, going once, going twice, and then 3 times. Okay. Again, feel free to send in any written comment if you believe that there's additional technical assistance items. I can tell you we're going to continue to proceed. I want to augment some things based on the feedback we have here today, but we are going to continue to work through your national organizations, your regional organizations, the AFNs, the USETs, the ATNIs, the intertribal councils of Arizona, Nevada, tribal chairmen's associations of California, GLTSI, et cetera. We're going to keep leveraging those resources or relationships, and then also your respective BIA regional offices to provide additional information. And then again, I do want to highlight that we are going to be announcing a Tribal Broadband Leaders Network, which is going to be a monthly forum to continue to share information about not only NTIA's programs, but other programs. And I just want to acknowledge one thing. We heard from tribes, and I agree. Part of it was capacity and our ability to be more responsive, to be candid. But we need to improve. I did hear this previously about information sharing and updates to the program as we've run into different nuanced roadblocks in process. And so the goal of the Tribal Broadband Leaders Network is to provide that monthly check-in. So if there are questions or if we need to provide an update, that we can do that. It's also going to be to share best practices. There's a lot of you doing great work. We at the government want to promote you doing great work. There's no need for you to sit and hear us talk any more than what we have today. We really want others to learn from each other in leveraging that as a resource. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the last question, and I am really I'm not gonna move quickly past this last one because it's an important one. A number of you have raised concerns about supply chain issues as a whole, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as IJA, there was a provision in the bipartisan infrastructure law that added $2 billion to the tribal broadband program, which we were all excited about. And we covered that earlier on how we're going to treat that. It also had a provision in there about the Build America, Buy America Act, which is administered through the Made in America office, which has been branded Meow. So you have the Build America, Buy America, BABA, and the Made in America office, which is Meow. And they are administering this particular component. And it's important. You know, all joking aside, I have small kids at home, so I like to joke when I heard the BABA thing. It very quickly reminded me of my newborn. But this is a big deal. This has to do with domestic sourcing of equipment. And many of you, even today, have shared your concerns about supply chain challenges. And in the next NOFO, right now, we are required to include the Build America, Buy America provisions, which would require every applicant to source all of your materials and equipment domestically, which is great. However, I have also heard from many of you that the availability of those resources domestically isn't there. And as many of you know, a lot of these materials and equipment are manufactured currently non-domestically. And so the question here today is, do we need to be seeking a waiver or not? Do you believe that the Build America, Buy America provisions would impact your ability to complete the project that you're looking at, should you be awarded, and especially being able to complete that in a timely manner? So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take hands in the queue. This is, again, a very important question that could have major financial impacts around how you administer your tribe's project, or whether how big of a project you may be able to do or not do. So with that, I will go ahead and pause, and we will wait to see if we get any comments in the queue. Also, because we are recording for the record on this question, I did hear Macaw state they were seeking, they preferred that their tribe be exempt from the Build America, Buy America provisions because of the supply chain concerns and not wanting to limit their ability to complete their projects in a timely manner. So I'll go ahead and pause, and Matt, we'll just wait and see if we have anybody come in the queue. And please don't be shy here, folks.
There were a couple new questions that went into the Q&A as well in the last little bit, I think. But we do have a comment. Anastasia Hoffman. We'll get her off mute and particular comment.
All righty, wonderful. All right, Ms. Hoffman, you are up. Welcome.
Baka koyana manslo nomak makan mam makilagaw. Thank you, Adam. Thank you all. I'm joining you from Bethel today. We're preparing for a pretty significant storm here later today. So hopefully my comments will come through before the before the storm hits. Guyana for holding this forum. In response to your question, I think we all can appreciate and support the intent that Baba wants to accomplish. But the reality is that we have this infrastructure need now in rural Alaska and rural Native America and across within our communities. And we're trying to bring service urgently. That's why we saw such an oversubscription to the award amounts that were initially provided in this program. So considering that we're in the midst of a supply chain crisis, it's not the right time to impose this requirement. And we appreciate the opportunity to express that. Guyana, Adam.
Good to see you, Ms. Hoffman, and happy to see that you had a safe trip home, that you made it back. And I hear you loud and clear so just for the record, what I heard you state, excuse me, is while the intentions, I think we all agree, are there to do the right thing, the reality of the need and the deployment to the communities that need these services and these supplies is now. And you don't want to see that impacted. So it sounds like you are an advocate in this case for an exemption from the Build America, Buy America, correct? Is that what I heard?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate that. All right. Anybody else?
Looking quiet so far.
Okay. While we're waiting here, I am going to, looks like we had a feedback from the Monacan Indian Nation. We did not meet the qualifications for round one due to the fact that 90% of the service area was covered by Starlink, which was not allowed by the state of Virginia. A week or so after the application deadline, the FCC denied Starlink approval. So we're hoping to make the second round. Are we concerned with how it will address prepayment and the costs? You know what I would say is that if you don't mind putting your name and your email in the chat, let us do a follow-up on that. I'd like to get a little bit more detail on the specifics around the project. I will say we are not changing the enforceable build-out commitment requirements that we all know is strongly supported in the round one. And so what I would say is if you do not have an enforceable build-out commitment and service is not being delivered at 25.3 to your households, I would strongly encourage you to apply for the second round. But sounds like there may be some nuances here, and I guess I'd just say, Kay, that we're happy to work through those nuances here. The team is. And then it looks like Monacan, Virginia. So I do have some members of my team on that work in the north, well, I guess I'd say the Northeast. So I will make sure that we have them reach out and get a hold of you. So thank you for the question. And then Dwayne Crank, I missed the consultation question 3. Are you able to provide that for me? The question was about how to improve on providing technical assistance. And so Dwayne, also we're happy to receive any feedback that you may have regarding that question in writing as well. And then it looks like we have Head Councilman Garcia in the queue, Matt? Or did we get a?
It looks like the comment was made into the Q&A.
All right, let's scroll. Tribes should be excluded from the requirement to buy America as explained by others. All right, so this again, we're gonna have a transcript here. So Councilman Garcia, I hear you, that you are taking the position that tribes should be excluded from the requirement. And again, based upon the other reasons that other people have given. So thank you, Councilman. Okay, well, I will, there's no need to keep dragging this thing on. It's Friday, and I can understand if folks have other things that they need to get done. So I don't want to take any more time than we have today. I'll give it 3 more seconds here to see if anybody else pops in the queue for question 4. 3, 2. All right, no hands. Great. So thank you for spending the last few hours with us to walk through these really important questions that the team has come up with. I mean, frankly, based upon the feedback that you've all provided. I want to highlight that the NOFO is not baked, no different than it was before. We really wanted to understand where everybody's head is at as we look to figuring out how to improve the NOFO. And so I want to thank all of you that provided your oral comments today and that have provided written comments to us as well. Our program really prides itself on leveraging the feedback from all of you to improve the needs of Indian country and addressing the digital divide of the indigenous communities in our nation. So thank you. Your feedback has been heard. We're going to do our best to incorporate that in a way that is equitable for everybody. So thank you for participating. I also want to thank, this is our 3rd and last consultation on NOFO number 2. I want to thank the team, Matt, Isabel, Macy, Carol, for being on. I also know a number of my team within the TBCP team are on today and taking copious notes. So thank you, team, for being here. And lastly, I want to thank again President Nez for the invocation and his leadership, as well as Assistant Secretary Davidson and all of our leadership at NTIA for continuing to support the work that we do. It is a great place to come work at NTIA, having the support of leadership that want to do what's right for tribal nations and recognizing that trust responsibility. And that is exactly why we have had these consultations, and we will have more into the future. So with that, I hope everybody has a safe weekend. Be blessed. Nishun Lovik. And thank you again for attending today's consultation. Bye now. Oh, Matt's going to kill me if I don't say this. Written consultation comments, TBCP consultation at ntia.gov. If you want to submit your written comments, again, the cutoff is 9 p.m. Eastern. So please get your comments in today. And then lastly, if you want to see how the awards are going and other information, you can check out the Tribal Nations tab on the Broadband USA website, which is where our tribal resources are located here at NTIA within the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth. All right, now I'm really done. All right, you guys, have a great weekend. Again, Nishun Lovik, be blessed, and you guys be safe. Thank you so much. Bye now.